In June of 2023, my girlfriend of 8 months decided to end our relationship. Of course, after being with her for 8 months and tentatively planning a future with her, the breakup was rather tough on me. After telling my friends about my breakup, my friends rallied around me and we started to hang out and do things regularly. One of the things we started to do regularly was play D&D. I will admit, for the first 6 months of playing D&D, I had no idea how to play. But my friends were patient with me, and little by little, I started to understand how to play. But once I understood how to play, I really started to get into D&D by buying unnecessary dice, listening to podcasts about D&D, and even bought various handbooks about D&D. After doing this, I eventually recognized that D&D had become something more than a distraction from a breakup for me. It became a hobby. After experiencing this and thinking about why I got into D&D, I have wondered, how do people find their hobbies? Can one go too far with their hobbies? And what makes a hobby a hobby? I'm your host, Jack Taggart, and on this episode, I talk to 4 people and ask how they got into their hobbies, what satisfaction they get from their hobbies, and how do they find meaning and purpose through their hobbies. This is my search for meaning and purpose. There are a wide range of hobbies. Some hobbies are viewed more acceptably, while others are viewed as strange or even can get a bad rap. To start off this episode, I interviewed 2 individuals whose hobby can be viewed as strange.
My name is Craylee McDonald.
And Kelly Gettner.
And we are Phoenix Sisters Cosplay, and this is how we find meaning and purpose in life.
I guess, what was the progression from simply doing this kind of passively and maybe not putting in as much effort to actually putting in really good and lots of effort?
But basically, when I first started, I was just doing Metropolis once a year. So I would have a year to plan for a few costumes. And then I started branching out. I knew I wanted to get into charity work, but there was no charity organizations around here. Luckily, a few years into it, Heroes Alliance chapter opened up around here. So I was able to get involved with that and do, that was really child focused. And so I was able to do a lot of charity work with my costumes. And I was able to kind of start stepping up my game. And with that, I had to focus on being a little more accurate with my costumes because you have to have a certain level of quality. And I had to kind of switch focus from doing whatever I wanted to do to doing child-friendly and more recognizable costumes. And so the Patreon was really nice because, first of all, I'm not going to say we're making a ton of money, but the Patreon was a little extra money coming in to help up our game again. And it also held us accountable where instead of just doing photo shoots at cons, we were committed to doing a photo shoot once a month. And granted, sometimes it'll be just Craylee in a photo shoot or just me, which is nice. But we were committed to making content regularly, which is it's really nice to have that accountability. And it really kind of makes you more creative. So I would say when we started the Patreon, that's when it really, really took off.
My story, surprise, surprise, is really similar to Kelly's. I don't do things halfway very well. And I think I went from just started to this is not a casual hobby anymore, even faster than Kelly, because I had Mark and Ruby nearby in the same town. And they go to a lot of conventions and they were more established adults. And so they were like, well, we've got extra fabric for this. We don't mind going and buying this extra piece of vinyl or whatever. We'll help you make the costume. We'll get you into all these conventions. I got motivated to prioritize it so much because it was making me and other people happy. For me, I was doing obscure characters and some of them were older. And something I started to notice was that a lot of older convention attendees would see me doing this character from Silver Age comics or something and go, oh my gosh, I have never seen that character cosplayed, because they weren't going to conventions when they were the age that they were, that those comics first came out. And so, I wasn't getting recognized by a ton of people, but the people who did recognize me would tell me that I made their day. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I want to keep doing that. I want to keep teaching new people about comic book characters where I can, and encouraging people not to be like super hiding their interest in it and stuff like I did before I thought it was cool. And then the Patreon is what made me really step up my game, exactly the same as Kelly. Now we do a charity event called the Multiverse Fundraiser every January. And I was already, because of the Patreon, constantly looking for ways to like make sure our branding was really tight and that we were growing our audience and stuff. But now that our cosplay brand name, for lack of a better term, is tied to that event, it motivates me even further.
What do you guys get out of cosplay? Like, what does it fulfill?
Oh, so much. First of all, the people I meet when I'm in costume, I met so many wonderful people. It just gives you kind of this easy connection because you're like wearing a banner that says, this is what I'm into. And it gives you an easy in. And I've also gotten to have these really cool, authentic conversations with creators of the characters that mean so much to me. And just these really awesome moments where those creators and even sometimes actors who played the characters will just like stop their signings and interact with me and be really excited to see me because I'm portraying their character and showing my love for their character. And then getting to just take a break from the real world and play. And then also just seeing the smile, seeing it on a child's face when you're portraying a more recognizable, kid-friendly character, seeing kids' faces light up and just the interactions you have with kids. I carry those with me. Like there are interactions I've had with kids like 10 years ago that are still, or even 15 years ago, they're still in my heart I'm like, okay, this is why I'm up at like 1 a.m, stabbing myself with the needle accidentally, stressing out over this costume because it's worth it.
All right, Creeley?
I have the exact same answers again. I form really great bonds with people. It makes me and other people happy. It's an artistic expression, and the role play aspect of it is quite literally therapeutic for me. I grind myself down to nothing all the time. Like I work too much. And even though like as a hobby, the prep and stuff for a lot of this is work, once I'm in costume, being somebody else for a little bit, my only job at the moment is to make faces and say things that this character would say. It gives me a break from me where I'm not just pushing myself all the time.
So Creeley, it sounds like it is part of like a pastime that does help you. And then Kelly, it's this part of your career. So then how do you balance between doing cosplay and I guess the other aspects of your life? What does that look like?
Tightrope walk. We both have very understanding husbands. I have 2 kids and I work full time, and so also I'm an author, and so it's a lot of balancing act, and you basically multitask when you can, but when it's something that's really important to you, you find the time. You kind of squeeze it in when you can. And yeah. I think getting to cons can be a tough thing, especially for Creeley. Going to cons is her job. So going to a con to have fun and cosplay is tough now.
Yeah, I have 3 jobs, and one of them is I have a business called Pokeballs by Crayley, where I take handmade Pokemon themed art as a vendor to conventions. And I'm also an editor, and I have other freelance work that I do. And I do volunteer work, and I'm really close with several of my family members. And so Kelly and I support each other. Both of our husbands are super supportive. We do multitask when we can. And sometimes it comes down to, the convention's coming up. Just drop everything because you need it, because you want to get this costume done to satisfy something for your spirit, for those like healing things that we get out of it. Especially, I don't want to speak for Kelly, but like especially me.
What prep does go into the cosplay?
Planning, and not just planning the crafting that you have to do, but then once you've got the product, you want to make sure that you have something to show for it when you're not wearing it. So you plan photo shoots, you plan guest appearances. Guest appearances have their own subset of planning because you need lodging. You need to know if they're going to pay you or if you're getting something in exchange for it, networking. And then we have our podcast too, which, I mean, running a podcast is no joke, and it's a live show. So there's promos for every episode, and then the recording equipment that we had to learn how to use and optimize our setups at home. Honestly, like even the way that I prioritize what gets cleaned in my house gets tied to this hobby, because it's like, do I have a costume coming up? Well, I need to make sure that if I'm taking photos indoor, this is cleaned, or I need to make sure that I've got room to change into this thing with these weird props or whatever, because trying to change in too small of a space one time gave me a temporary shoulder injury.
Oh, ugh. How does cosplay influence, I'll even say, define your life?
So most of my good friends now are friends I've made through cosplay.
Same.
Yeah. The characters that I cosplay are usually characters that inspire me in some way, and that really has improved my life for the better. It just helps me get through my hard days, helps me get through challenges in my life. Like, I'll sit back and go, okay, what would Black Canary do in this situation? Again, so many opportunities to meet creators that I love and admire. And as a writer, it's been really cool to meet comic creators that I admire, because that inspires me. So
cosplay taught me how to have fun again. I was not having a lot of fun when I first started, and now I'm like, well, let me try this other hobby. It worked out with cosplay, and I don't always turn into a decade-long passion like this, but I retrained myself how to relax and do some stuff that's just for me by cosplaying. So I don't know, it sounds dramatic, but for all I know, cosplaying saved my life, because I was literally working so much that I was like sleeping on the edge of my college campus in my car for 2 hours in between commitments I had made sometimes, because I knew when I got home I was just going to be studying, because my daytime was taken up so much with classes and multiple jobs. So I finally had some motivation to not necessarily work that hard so that I could cosplay more. Like,
after kind of picking your brains about cosplay and kind of why you do it, how do you gain meaning and purpose from cosplay?
I basically choose characters that I feel connected to. And every so often I will take a step back and ask myself, is this still fun? Or is this causing me stress? And I also make a point to go to events, whether it's conventions or charity events, where I will be among friends. You just choose the characters that you feel passionate about. You don't do something just because you should do it, just because it's a hot popular thing, or you think it's going to get you attention online. That's the wrong reasons to do it.
my answer is pretty much the same. Again, I choose characters that are already meaningful to me, and then I bring them to life in my way, and that adds meaning to my life by connecting me even more deeply to those characters and the ideals they uphold or the flaws that they are also battling against, or whatever it is that made me feel so drawn to that character. And then on top of that, once you do that, you fall in and become friends with people in a different way because it starts out so easy. Hi, I'm wearing a billboard. This is what I'm into.
The advice I would give to anyone listening is, if there's something that you're hiding about yourself that you really like, or that's really who you truly are, just stop. Anyone who is going to turn their backs on you or not be friends with you or judge you because of it is not your people anyways. By being your true authentic self and leaning into whatever makes you happy, you're going to find deeper friendships. You're going to find the people who are your kindred spirits, and you're going to just live your best life. Life is just too short to hide who you are and to not do the things that bring you joy.
To be honest, I was a bit surprised at the answers I got on how cosplaying can bring meaning and purpose in life. Of course, it would make sense that if you do a hobby long enough, and to the extent that the Phoenix Sisters go to, that you would make friends on that hobby. However, you don't necessarily have to be a creative person to have a hobby. For my next interview, I interview someone who is part of the British Columbia Scientific Cryptozoological Club, or the BCSCC.
My name is Adam McGurr, and this is how I find meaning and purpose in life. So I've been a part of the BCSCC for the better part of 15 to 20 years, actually. But before that, when I was a kid, I was really into the mysteries of the world, like the pyramids, Stonehenge, even things like ghosts, and the paranormal. I feel like you get to explore all kinds of different subjects when you're a kid. And I ended up being mostly drawn to these kind of creatures or stories of, legends, things like monsters, and some of it being, like folklore or even hearing about different traditions around the world. And that I guess I gravitated towards this idea that there could still be some undiscovered animals out there that we don't, that humans haven't completely kind of conquered the planet, and that there's still something out there to be discovered. And I think that's kind of the allure, a little bit, if you will, to the world of cryptozoology.
Just to clarify, cryptozoology is the study of animals that are legendary, extinct, unknown, and whose existence is disputed or unsubstantiated. The goal of cryptozoology is to evaluate the possibility of these animals existing. Examples of cryptids would be Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. What exactly does the BCSCC do?
Yeah, so the British Columbia Scientific Cryptozoology Club, basically we take a more skeptical scientific lens to investigating cryptozoology. And there are a lot of different kind of communities online that you can find that investigate subjects like Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and stories of aquatic cryptids, like, for example, the Loch Ness Monster is probably the one that people are most commonly aware of. But I think in this day and age, it's more important than ever to really apply kind of a scientific lens and try to discuss the topics in a way that we can be taken seriously by people in the media and the scientific community. I think that's what really makes the BCSCC stand out. And the reason why I joined is because of that kind of adherence to, we're talking about things like biology, anthropology, and not as much about the paranormal.
How did you find the British Columbia Scientific Cryptozoological Club?
Well, probably became aware of it because I, through my interest, kind of childhood interest in cryptozoology, I would be checking books out of the library, and I was, a regular visitor to my school library and slowly kind of amassing my own wealth of knowledge. And at that time, I was living in a different part of Canada, in Ontario, and my family and I had kind of slowly moved westward towards Alberta, and that's kind of when I first started hearing about Sasquatch and stories of Bigfoot, because being closer to the mountains is where a lot of these encounters had supposedly taken place. And eventually we ended up moving to British Columbia, and I found that I was really in kind of like the hotbed here of legends and these historical stories and reports. So I think I probably discovered an old website of the BCSCC, and then I attended a Sasquatch symposium that happened it was actually at the Museum of Vancouver, and that's where I met John, who is president of the BCSCC. And I kind of slowly became involved after that. I became the webmaster for the website and totally kind of took that on, and then started to kind of attend club meetings and take on more of a leadership role.
What, I guess, kind of presses you to be a part of this, be a part of the club?
Well, yeah, in terms of what keeps me involved is that there's constantly new stories of interesting things that are being discovered in our own backyard. And anytime that something kind of pops up in the news where something washes ashore that people can't quite identify, or there's reports of somebody seeing something in the news, it kind of reinvigorates my passion a little bit to want to know, what was that? What is it really? And I have a passion for trying to communicate and trying to also get other people excited about these kind of mysteries. And part of it for me is contributing to citizen science. I like to feel that the work that I'm doing might be useful to a much wider audience.
I podcast as a hobby, and I've kind of realized if I were to go full-time or pro, I wouldn't enjoy it as much. But is that the same case for you, or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you say, you might not enjoy it full-time if you had, a bunch of obligations or a shareholder or a sponsor to report back to. Whereas when even if it's, spending my own money on things like stickers and notebooks and stuff, I can do what I want with it and spend as much time as I want or feel I need to on different things. And it's really one of those pastimes that is better not being directed by, a bottom line. You almost have to accept that you could spend thousands of hours or hundreds of thousands of hours if you had that kind of time, sitting, waiting for something to appear, and it may never appear for you. So I feel like that's where you need to derive the satisfaction from a different element, like the social element, or giving back to the community in some way, or maybe the citizen science that we talked about, because people sometimes have this itch where they want to go out and find Bigfoot and, answer this question once and for all, like, do these mystery creatures really exist or not? And so I think that's something I've had to learn to accept over the years, is that we're probably not going to get a yes or no answer to those kinds of questions. It's more about the process and the community and enjoying learning about these kinds of things.
If overnight, all the cryptids were all found, what would you do? What would your next hobby be?
Well, I mean, I think in an event like that, I've thought about that before. Like, what if Sasquatch was discovered and suddenly, there would be a lot of kind of media attention, and there might be a need for somebody to advocate on behalf of the the creature, in terms of conservation, maybe protecting their habitat or promoting education around a topic like this. I mean, I feel like members of our community would be kind of uniquely qualified to, either guide some people into the area or try to make sure that, if there's a rare kind of previously unidentified species living in this, we find out that it's, all this time that these things are there, then it would really open up endless possibilities for further, learning and research about what do they eat and what are their mating habits, and just really that would be the point at which the scientific community and the anthropological community and all kinds of different people would really kind of, I think, become interested even more so.
How does your hobby, and I guess to an extent cryptozoology and the club, influence or define your life?
In terms of the influence that my hobby has on my life, I mean, I think especially since I've been into this since I was a kid, I really have enjoyed, being outdoors and exploring different areas and being able to travel kind of around and hear all these different stories from people in different communities, and look into these kinds of things. So I like to think that now that I'm a little bit older, especially that I've become more worldly maybe and more kind of well-rounded as an individual as a result of participating in a lot of these activities. I think that's really, part of what's fulfilling about it is that, you feel like you're a part of this community and you can exchange ideas with people and find people who are also interested in very, very niche things that not everybody wants to discuss or is willing to really dive deep into.
So far, we've heard from people who have very interesting, and I would even say uncommon hobbies. However, hobbies don't have to be interesting and uncommon. Rather, they can be the complete opposite. For my final interview, I interview someone whose hobby is quite uneventful compared to other hobbies. I interview someone whose hobby is birding.
My name is Stephanie Greenwood, and this is how I find meaning and purpose in life. Birding is a little bit different than bird watching. Bird watching is casually looking out the window or having a bird feeder and looking and enjoying the birds in your yard or just kind of casual about it. Birding is a bit of a sport. It's a bit competitive. It's trying to see as many species as you can in a certain regional area, like a state or a county or the United States, over a span of time. So, for instance, I saw over 300 species in Utah over the course of a year. And there's a lot of listing, and it's kind of competitive, and it's a bit of a sport rather than just kind of casual bird watching.
How did you get into it?
One morning, I was kind of waking up, laying in bed, and I heard a thud on my window. And I looked outside, and down on the porch below, there was this little teeny owl. It was so small. It was like 6 inches. It was just this little ball. And this owl had crashed into my window. And I had no idea that there was even such a thing as an owl this small. And so I took pictures of it, and it ended up being okay, and it flew away. And I looked up online and tried to figure out what this owl was. And I came upon a website by Tim Avery. He's the current record holder for the Utah Big Year record holder. So he has a lot of information on his website. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that there were so many different species of birds in Utah and in general. And that it was actually possible to see something interesting in your own backyard. And it was a bit of a rush. So I was hooked at that moment and from there, I was always looking for new things and trying to figure out identifications and going out with my camera and being like, what was that? What was that I heard? Making recordings. And it was, like I said, it was a rush. And I never turned back from there.
How long was it that you started kind of doing this kind of passively to like, I mean, basically managing the largest birding Facebook page in Utah? What was the progression like with that?
So in 2011 is when the owl hit my window. And basically from there, it was birding. It kind of took over my brain. So 2012, I set out to see as many species as I could. And it was January 1st, and I was out on Antelope Island looking for as many things as I could. And I learned so much in that year, and I saw quite a few species. And then 2013, I tried to do the same thing, see as many as I could. 2014, that was probably my biggest year, where I did, I think, about 305 species in Utah that year. And it was a lot of work. It's a lot of driving, going all around the state, going down to Washington County or Moab area, and going everywhere to see as many birds as you can, and chasing. You hear that somebody got a rare bird at some location, and so you're just dropping everything and hopping in your car and chasing after it to see if you can find it. And it really was a lot of fun. So the Facebook birding group was not started by me. It was started by a couple of other people who ended up moving out of state, or for health reasons, they couldn't run it anymore. And so I offered to take it over, and I had a couple of people helping me for a couple of years there. But now it's just me taking care of it, and it's a lot of fun. My life back then in 2011 through 2015, I had a business, and it was really kind of operating itself. And so I had a lot of time to be able to pursue my birding pursuits. And now my life is quite a bit different. I have a baby, and I have my business that I need to run with more of a hands-on approach. And so the Facebook group now is just kind of my connection still to birding. It's still being involved in the community, and because it still is something that I love, but I don't need it the way that I did back then. Back then, my life was a lot different.
Obviously, you don't have as much time as you used to, and so when you had enough lot time to not so much, I guess maybe how did that balance shift? And I guess what were things that you kind of realized, you're like, okay, you know what, I can't be birding like I used to. I need to focus on this. When was that? And I guess what were the realizations of that?
The realization for me, it really didn't happen in like, oh, I need to stop birding less. It happened when I broke up with and ended that toxic relationship that I was in. And it happened naturally because I got into a new relationship within like 10 days. So kind of that shift, I was like, well, and the new relationship was so exciting and fulfilling, and I wanted to spend all my time with him. And I took him birding a couple of times, but I just all of a sudden lost that need to be out finding things, because I was finding meaning and purpose and excitement and all the good brain chemicals with him instead. And it's been 5 years since then, and I'm still in the same boat. I would still, rather be at home with him, spending my time with him and our child, than out birding. And I'm sure that I will get back into birding when our child is older, and maybe if I have more free time when I'm retired at some point, if I am fortunate enough to retire at some point, I'm sure I'll get back into it. So as far as like, if your hobby is starting to take over your life, and if your job is in jeopardy because you're taking your hobby to an extreme, or your relationships are strained because you're always gone doing a hobby, I think that the hobby is more of the symptom of the problem than the problem itself. You could have looked at my life and said, oh, you're birding way too much. and it's a problem. Well, it ended up it was the symptom of the kind of toxicity in my life. So if your hobby is taking over, take stock of your life and figure out the reasons behind it, why you need this, maybe for your self-esteem or for those good brain chemicals that it gives you, and what is it that you're not getting in your life that this is filling.
How much does your hobby or influence or define your life?
Everybody still sees me as the bird lady a lot of the time. And my baby's first word was bird. And so I'm teaching him now, and it's a lot of fun. He's 15 months now, and his first word was bird. And we have pictures of birds all over the house, and we go around and look at the birds, and I'm teaching him bird calls and songs, and he does a pretty good black-headed grosbeak impression. We have wild turkeys that come to the yard, and we always look at them and feed them, but it kind of influences me in other ways where I'll be outside talking to somebody, having a conversation, and I'll hear a downy woodpecker and just be like, stop everything, downy woodpecker. They're like, well, what do you think I should do with this situation? Downy woodpecker. I'm not listening to you. I'm listening to the birds in the background, and there's also a ruby-crowned kinglet. But I still have that in my brain going on, and every time I go outside, I'm listening for things, and people might think that I'm listening to them, but I'm really just listening to the background and what species are around, just in case there's something exciting. But also, like, it's something that me and my dad connect on with because he's a photographer. He lives right by Farmington Bay, and so he goes out and looks at all of the birds in the wetlands and sends me pictures, and it's something that we can connect on because he kind of started that in my childhood, looking at interesting birds.
How do you find or gain meaning and purpose from birding?
I think it's a good reminder that there's hope everywhere, that you can find, even in a dark time of your life, you can find things that make you happy. And the life's a bit of a miracle. It's amazing how birds can show up and fly thousands of miles in migration. And all of a sudden it will be the same bird that was there in your yard last year, and that same bird shows up again the next year. After having been in South America or Mexico or wherever it goes, that these little flying miracles will show up. And it's a little bit breathtaking.
After listening to these individuals explain their stories and how they find meaning and purpose, I'm a bit blown away at how much joy and satisfaction these individuals get from their hobbies. To be honest, it's almost as if it's more than joy and satisfaction, almost like a liberation of sorts. Whether that is the liberation of finally being able to do what you love, escaping the mundanity of life, and even an outlet from the hardships of life.
My name is Craylee McDonald.
Kelly Gettner.
Stephanie Greenwood.
Adam McGurr, and this is how we find
How we find
meaning and purpose in life.